My name is Jeff Galvin. I'm a physician, and I've got Tracy Alston here, who's a neuroscience person who works with us. And I founded Vitality Medical Wellness Institute about 6 years ago out of frustration with medicine. I'm board certified in emergency medicine and was a trauma guy in inner city hospital, trained in Boston in the middle of the crack wars, was in the military, was a trauma guy, moved locally about 15 years ago, and then noticed that, what we started taking care of mostly in the emergency department were things related to chronic disease. And that's what kind of drove me to say, hey, there's got to be a better way. We can't just be prescribing medicines for all this stuff because things just keep getting worse. And from that, we got into performance. And I got interested in performance when I was a resident. One block of my residency, I was in the trauma ICU, and it was a very busy service, inner city hospital, tons of violence, tons of trauma. And that schedule was every other night call, which was 36 hours on, 12 hours off for 3 months with no days off. And to me, that sounded insane. I said, how can you perform, especially in that setting where you have to be at your best all the time? And I can remember honestly being so tired one day that we had a trauma that we brought into the CT scanner, and there's a team of maybe 10, 15 people. It's loud. We put the patient in the scanner, they hit scan, and I realize as I look around, there's nobody in the room. And I had fallen asleep standing in the corner because that's how sleep exhausted I was and sleep deprived, but still was able to perform. And it got me thinking, the brain's pretty amazing that we can do these things. I've also had extensive training in hormone replacement and athletic medicine and optimizing performance. I'm board certified in bariatric medicine as well, so we do a lot with weight loss and really fixing lifestyle to fix chronic problems. Tracy, who has way more letters after our name than I do, which I'm a little jealous of, is board certified in biofeedback and neurofeedback. Tracy, come on out.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? Happy Friday. My name is Tracy Alston. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm board certified in neurofeedback and biofeedback. Anybody in here familiar with biofeedback, neurofeedback? Yeah? That's awesome. Well, I'm super excited to be here with Dr. G today. We're going to really talk about the brain and performance. I got involved in biofeedback, neurofeedback, studying the brain and performance when I was going through some graduate classes at Lenore University. I'm an undergraduate at Wake Forest University, and I played some college basketball there. And I really wish I knew more about biofeedback and neurofeedback when I was playing basketball, because it can really excel your performance. But I was studying at Lenore. I went to a conference in Cary, North Carolina, and a veteran came on. He had PTSD, traumatic brain injury. He was on 36 different medications. And he talked about how the only thing that really worked for him is when he learned about his brain and his body through the science of biofeedback and neurofeedback. So what we're going to do today is talk to you a little bit more about the science of the brain, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Excited to be here.
All right. So I'm big about optimizing. You can't just be normal, and your doctor wants you to be normal. And no offense to your doctor, but your doctor is interested in you being average, like everybody else. And I always tell my patients that average is Walmart, and we all shop at Walmart, but we all kind of hate it. And if we won that Powerball the other day, and Nordstrom's opened up a grocery store right next to Walmart, where would you shop? And so we want our patients to be Nordstrom's and not Walmart. Your doctor, there's a little bit of a bias about performance in medicine. We don't want to cheat. We don't want people to perform better than others. And I think that's ridiculous. We're all high performers here. You want to perform at your best. We work a lot with nutrition, with fitness, with reversing chronic disease via lifestyle, because diets don't work. None of them work. If we want to fix things chronically, we've got to get to the root cause of things. We look at metabolism. We optimize hormones. We look at personalized genetics. And now we're looking at the brain. And we're going to be focusing on brain function today and how to achieve peak performance. Back in my day, my first computer was an Apple II. And those disk drives, you know how much they held? Anybody know how much an Apple II disk drive held? 160K. And we really want our patients to be, the Alienware monster machine, which I actually have in my office, by the way. And there's two pieces of that. There's a hardware piece, and like anything else, if we want to have a machine optimized, we've got to have optimal hardware, and we've got to have optimal software as well. And in terms of the software, that's what Tracy deals with: biofeedback, neurofeedback, getting those programs in the brain working right. And then the hardware piece has to do with the brain metabolism, how the brain functions, whether there are problems within the brain. And if we optimize brain biochemistry, we can improve cognition, we can improve performance, we can improve memory, focus, concentration, all the things that we want to do to be good at our jobs. We can also, optimize creativity, and so there's a role in art as well. One of the things we do to optimize the brain are things called nootropics, and nootropic means to bend the mind. And these are any of a number of compounds. Some of them are medicines, some of them are supplements, some of them are naturally occurring herbal compounds that have different effects in the brain. Now, when we're talking about the brain, and I'm not going to get too into the science, but we want to enhance cognition, we want to enhance function. That's what nootropics tend to do. Now, a great one is Adderall. I'm sure that there's more than a few people that you know that are using Adderall that probably aren't prescribed. Why is it that people love Adderall? Why is it college students love Adderall? Because it makes them smarter. It lets them focus. It lets them stay in the library for 12 hours because we're optimizing neurotransmitters. Now, we may need to optimize either production or we may need to diminish breakdown depending on the neurotransmitters. I'm going to just briefly go through some of these compounds. They're generally regarded as safe. So the majority of these compounds can be used very safely. They've been used for years and years and years, whereas Adderall is what? It's an amphetamine, it's speed, it's addictive, it's a problem. A lot of people are dealing with addiction to Adderall, and we can get similar effects without needing to use dangerous drugs. What's a neurotransmitter? Well, our brain is a huge neural network, and there are all these connections, and they're not physically connected. There's actually a space between each neuron, and in that space they communicate by using these chemicals called neurotransmitters, and each neurotransmitter may have a different effect, and there's quite a few of them. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, glutamate, endorphins, you've heard of a lot of these things, but there are some particular ones when we talk about performance that we're really interested in. For example, dopamine. You know what dopamine is? It's the pleasure chemical. And so when we feel good, we feel really good, that's dopamine having its effect. Now, if we have a problem with dopamine, either we don't make enough of it or we're breaking it down too quickly or other problems, then that might lead to depression. And so when we talk about antidepressant meds, what are we doing? We're hacking these systems. For good or bad, sometimes they have a lot of side effects. Serotonin is another one that's associated with happiness, and you've probably heard of an SSRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So when we reuptake a neurotransmitter, we kind of get rid of it. So if we inhibit the reuptake of serotonin, what's going to happen? We're going to get happier. And so that is one of the reasons we use those types of medicines. Acetylcholine is about arousal and stimulation and focus. Norepinephrine is the same thing. It's the fight or flight hormone, which is great if we're preparing for a project and we want to be focused, or we're running from a bear, or someone's chasing us with a knife. That's great. Maybe not so great if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I've got to go to sleep. And so sometimes we have problems with overproduction that results in sleep problems, anxiety, stress, things like that. And we want to get to all those things. How do we use it to biohack? Well, if we understand the underlying pathways, then we can take people's symptoms or what they want to achieve and match compounds that affect those things to those symptoms or those goals. We can improve focus, memory, logic skills. We can improve creative writing and speaking. We can actually improve our appreciation of color and sound. We can enhance that. Improve logic skills, energy and alertness. On the other hand, we can also diminish anxiety and stress and help people achieve more peace in their lives. We don't always want to be at volume 10. Sometimes we want to be at volume 1. There are different types of nootropics, and I'm going to just broadly cover them, and we're going to open it up to questions afterwards, because we do want to get to our hacking of Mindy here shortly. But there are different types, and the most common are a group of medicines and compounds called racetams, and these things have been used for decades. They're extremely safe, and what they do is they actually increase metabolism and protein synthesis in the brain. So we can increase maybe dopamine production or serotonin production. We can actually ramp up the volume If we increase metabolic rate, it's like overclocking your CPU. We can get better performance. The problem is that the effects vary from person to person, so what might work for you may not work for you. And we can use things like quantitative EEGs and stress testing and genetics to get an idea of, well, there are 50 compounds. Instead of randomly trying 50, based on your genetics, based on our testing and everything else, these are the 5 that are likely to have an effect, and why don't we just concentrate on these? Some of them are are designed to improve focus and concentration. Artists use them to improve their sensation of color, to improve creativity. They generally target the higher areas of the brain, the cortex, where our advanced thought processes live. Sometimes we have to stack them, meaning that we have to give both the precursors to, so if I increase your acetylcholine production by 50%, but I don't give you any extra choline, guess what's going to happen? We're going to burn through our choline reserves and we're going to crash. So we don't want that to happen. So we've got to balance all these things, and very often we'll stack different things together to get an optimal effect. These are some examples of types of racetams and what we use them for. So pramiracetam is really good for enhancing memory and learning. So it can be used in a short-term thing. If you're at a class, people will take that prior. It's used in colleges quite a bit. It can enhance our logic and technical thinking, but it's also used by artists because they get a pop in color and sound if it's one of the ones that works for you. Aniracetam is stronger, you need a lower dose, and that has some effect on beta waves in the brain and lowers them. It has an anti-anxiety effect, which is important. Many of these have a neuroprotective effect, meaning that they protect against oxidative stress in the brain, they protect from long-term degradation of brain cells. And neuroprotection is important because I'm a believer that I can get our patients to live well past 100. That's not because I'm the world's brightest doctor, but I understand that if we deal with chronic problems, if we get basic lifestyle right, if we get nutrition right, we lower inflammation, we get people living the right way, there are technologies in the pike probably within the next 5 years that are going to radically extend lifespan. So think about that when you're doing your retirement planning. And we've got to get our patients there and be healthy, because if they show up and you've had a heart attack and you've got diabetes and all these other problems, you're probably not eligible for it. But if we take the time and get people right, and just as an aside, this is sort of my philosophy of what I tell my patients. You guys are pretty young, but when you guys have kids and they learn how to drive, you don't teach them to look at the hood ornament of the car because they're going to crash into something. You teach them to look out ahead. And in medicine, what we do is we look at the hood ornament. Oh, you've got diabetes, here's a medicine. They ignore the signs that occur 5, 10, 15 years earlier that this is coming. Being an ex-military guy, if I'm on the rifle range, the 100-yard range, and I have a target that's 100 yards away, and that target represents cancer or diabetes or stroke or heart attack, and I line my weapon up and I fire it, and the bullet goes 99 yards, and when it's a yard away, I say, I don't want to have a heart attack. What can I do at that point to deflect the bullet? Nothing. God can reach down and pluck it out of the air, but I really can't do anything else. However, if I walk up to that rifle before I pull the trigger and I move the barrel, and I don't need to move the barrel 2 inches, I don't need to move the barrel an inch. If I move the barrel 1 degree, which is imperceptible to your eye, does anybody know what a 1 degree deflection on a 100-yard rifle range equates to? It's a 6-foot miss. So that little tiny change here has huge effects downstream, and we're always looking 30, 40 years down the line. Oxiracetam, another one that improves sensory effect and is used by artists. It's very stimulatory, so sometimes people can get headaches and irritability with these things, and we've got to be careful, so it's important to monitor them. We need to stack this one with choline because it really does increase acetylcholine production quite a bit, and if we don't give people baseline choline reserves, then they're going to have problems. Phenylpiracetam, this is sort of the academic athlete's racetam because it really enhances concentration, learning. It's actually banned in sports because it's actually a physical performance enhancer as well. And that's pretty cool stuff. Nupept is a new one. It's not technically a racetam, but it works the same way. It's one of the best overall cognition enhancers, so learning, memory, processing speed. It also improves reflexes. So if you're a gamer and you're going to be in a competition, you might want to take that beforehand. And it has a very strong effect in reducing anxiety. So these are just some examples. Ampakines are interesting, and they're very popular in college and in the workplace because you get similar effect to Adderall. So you get these amphetamine-like effects without the side effects. And acutely, in the initial phase of the drug, it tends to improve cognition, memory, and can have an effect on some psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, bipolar. Chronically, if you take them over a long period of time, they tend to improve memory on a permanent basis. Also, can help with brain degeneration. It's being studied in dementia and some other things, Alzheimer's. Siniferam is the one that typically is in this class, and they call it the get things done nootropic because it's a very functional thing. It helps, it's really good for concentration, focus. If you're a procrastinator, this will help with that. It enhances both short-term and long-term memory, and you get a little bit of a mood elevation, so people feel, they get a little pop. That's similar to what you get with amphetamines. People like amphetamines because they make them feel good. And also, there's a little bit of an anti-anxiety effect and some sensory improvement as well. Eugeroics are interesting because this is a hack that I used to use when I worked in the emergency department. Provigil. Have you guys heard of Provigil? It enhances wakefulness. So if I worked, 5 nights in a row, when I was a resident, what we did was we worked 5 nights. We had 24 to 36 hours off, and then we came back and did the opposite, 5 days. That's not very pleasant if you're going from 5 nights to 5 days. So Provigil would let me stay awake after my last night shift and fall asleep normally at night, and it would help me reset. It's used for, in the military, we sometimes give them out to soldiers if they've got to stay awake for long periods of time. Provigil is very expensive. We use adrafinil, which is available as a research chemical, so it's available, and it gets metabolized to modafinil, which is what we were just talking about. It increases this neurotransmitter called hypocretin and increases alertness, and is pretty cool. It's again banned for sports because it increases stamina. So, a lot of these things if you're a professional athlete, we've got to be careful with some of these things. It will increase feelings of pleasure and decrease stress and anxiety because it enhances dopamine and serotonin. There are other ones, creatine. We've all heard of creatine. Go to the gym, get pumped up. Well, creatine has a pretty potent effect in the brain. It helps replenish ATP, which is the energy stores of the brain. So there are things like that studies have shown improve memory and cognition. So there's more than just weightlifting reason to take creatine. There are some herbal agents, and one of my favorites is holy basil because it has ursolic acid in it. And what ursolic acid does is it enhances secretion of growth hormone. And growth hormone leads to muscle development, can reduce chronic inflammation, can reduce chronic disease, increase muscle mass, and you can actually, there have been studies where people have taken this and gotten a similar effect to working out by just taking ursolic acid, and holy basil is a good source of it. One of our favorites is caffeine, and we got Mindy here, and we're going to transition here in a second. But caffeine is a great nootropic. I mean, I'm sure many of you had a nootropic this morning. It enhances cognition, alertness. It binds adenosine receptors in the brain, and we clear those receptors off when we sleep. As the day progresses, they kind of get bound up again, and that's what causes us to get tired. Caffeine kind of frees those receptors up again, and we get an energy boost. We oftentimes with our patients do a little biohack with caffeine because for some people caffeine makes them very jittery. But if you combine caffeine with L-theanine, you get all the cognitive effects with none of the jitteriness. And that's a pretty cool thing. I use that when my family's from Syracuse and we drive up there. We usually drive at night, and I take caffeine and L-theanine, and I'm alert, but I'm not like going crazy. There's many more, and we often stack these things together. We might use an ampakine plus a racetam plus creatine plus choline, everybody's a little bit different. How do we find out? Well, we've got to talk to people. We've got to look at potentially genetics, look at some lab work, things like that to kind of get people dialed in correctly. But it's pretty cool. And the nice thing is they're all pretty safe. Like there's none that are addictive. There are none that have serious side effects as opposed to Adderall and cocaine and other amphetamines like methamphetamine, which are all performance enhancers, but they have very bad side effects and bad problems. The next thing we're going to talk about is software. And so we can hack hardware, but software is just important. So we can have the hottest machine, and we go to play our game, and if the graphic driver isn't optimized, then maybe it doesn't work very well. And so Tracy is our software wizard, and we've got Mindy here. And we do two things when we look at the brain. One is more physical than the other. One of them is called neurophysiologic stress testing, and that's essentially looking at your individual response to stress. And everybody's got what I call a stress fingerprint. And when we look at these things, what we're looking at is, you want to bring it over here? You want to put it there? We hook people up to, essentially it looks like a polygraph. We're looking at respiratory rate, respiratory depth, heart rate variability, muscle tension, skin temperature, skin conductance, and we put people through some baseline data gathering and then a series of stressors. And at the end of that, Tracy can tell you exactly what your personal stress response is. We can then take that data and utilizing biofeedback, we can focus on that. So for me, when I get stressed, my respiratory rate gets a little shallow and my temperature dips a little bit. So for me, when I do biofeedback, I'm doing things that are working on improving my respiratory rate, respiratory depth. That tends to relax me. I don't have, Tracy will tell you, I don't have like a huge stress response. It's probably from working in the ER for 20 years, but everybody's a little bit different. And we use feedback as a way of teaching you to control yourself. Biofeedback, neurofeedback, feedback is just a response to an input. So if we're looking at muscle tension, let's say that your stress response is muscle tension, we'd hook some electrodes up and we'd have a feedback mechanism that's looking at your stress level in your muscles. And the more you can relax, you'll get some feedback. Maybe it's a light bulb. What we use is pretty slick. We basically have some software that we put a movie in, doesn't matter what movie it is. And when we first hook you up, you see nothing. It's a blank screen, you don't hear anything. And the more you relax those muscles, you start hearing snippets of the movie. It comes in and out. As you relax more, you hear all the movie. Then you start seeing snippets of the video. And your goal is to be able to watch and listen to the whole movie for maybe 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Once we do that about 8 or 10 times, guess what happens? The brain's a neural network. We've rewired that, and that becomes a permanent change. It sometimes needs a little bit of refreshing, some things that people can do at home, but we can make permanent changes on stress response. And stress is the sand in the gears. It's what breaks us down over time. So if we can improve stress response, that's important. The other part is quantitative EEGs, and we're doing that with Mindy here. We're going to hack Mindy a little bit. And we thank her very much for volunteering.
Yes,
Normally we'd have about 20 electrodes on the brain, but we're just going to be looking, where are you looking at?
We're going to just look at 2 today. We're going to have right here on the frontal lobe for her. So I'm going to get her hooked up.
And so it's essentially a quantitative EEG is a real-time map of the brain waves. And it turns out that, we have, I'm going to just buzz through this. We talked a little bit about that to the side of it. Brain mapping, we can generate basically a map of the brain. And we know what areas of the brain do what. It's a little different for men and women, but we can optimize and we can identify problems. So we can do 2 things with neurofeedback. We can fix problems, things like brain injuries, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorders, things like that. We can actually utilize neurofeedback to reprogram those areas of the brain without using medications and get very good results. We use it for ADD in kids all the time. If we have high performers and we map them, they're looking pretty good, then we get to ask the really cool question, what do you want to do? Well, I'd really like to enhance my creativity. Okay, let's design a neurofeedback around the areas of the brain that deal with creativity, or I want to increase my focus. And after about 20 or 30 neurofeedback sessions, we actually make permanent changes in the brain, and we can actually show people their before map and their after map and show them exactly what's going on. And we get incredible results. And again, my focus is on performance. Tracy does both performance and pathology, and we have you know, we have a lot of people that have pathology too, so we used both. We had a really interesting case. We had a guy who owns a big company locally who's been a patient and he just can't get on the program. He can't eat right. He can't get himself motivated to exercise, and he keeps getting sicker and sicker. And I keep threatening to fire him because I'm like, dude, I'm not going to preside over your death. And he just cannot get himself to do it. So we mapped him, and what did you find? The areas of the brain that deal with motivation,
Very low.
very, very low.
Low power sometimes is significant of brain fog, memory, fatigue, depression, motivation concerns. He had been trying everything that you guys had suggested, but he just could not get motivated to get in. And when we did that mapping on him, we could see clearly globally low power. And a lot of times we see that with fatigue, depression, and low motivation.
So this is interesting about that particular patient, because I was excited. Tracy said, hey, this is the problem. I'm like, awesome, we can fix that. She's like, no, he won't do it. So you look at his brain. He's not going to be able to make a decision to do this. And sure enough, he hasn't done it. He just came back again. He knows he has to do it. His friends are all telling him he has to do it, but he can't get himself over the hump. And Tracy was exactly right. I think we'll wear him down eventually. I hope we will. Quantitative EEG, we get this map of the brain. Unfortunately, I got some low resolutions from images of our software, but this is essentially looking at different colors. So high frequencies, low frequencies, medium frequencies, and it depends. If you're concentrating and you're working on a task, beta, which is high frequency, is important in particular areas of the brain. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, that's not good. You're not going to sleep. So we want to optimize brain function for the task at hand. And so we have to know a little bit about what we're doing. So Trace, what are we going to do here?
I'm going to start out with a stress test. Let's start out with the stress testing. Kind of show you guys some brain, EMG, which is muscle activity. I'm going to have her just do a baseline assessment for her. Let me grab that converter.
We'll put it up on the screen here.
Can we put that one on that screen? Yeah.
And I'll unplug this. This is that's HDMI.
Yes, yeah, that's perfect. HDMI.
But again, we can, it's not about, in medicine, what we say is, oh, you're a 40-year-old male, you need to do X, Y, and Z. What we really want to be able to do is say, for you, and you alone, this is what we got to do, because we know what your labs are, we know what your genetics are, we know how your brain works. Who cares what everybody else is doing? All it really matters is focusing on the performance of the individual, because we don't use generalities. We want to focus on each individual. We want to do what we call personalized medicine, which is probably the way of the future, but I don't imagine it happening anytime soon the way the healthcare system is. So while we're getting that set up, does anybody have any questions about what? Yes. There are. They're not easily like supplemented. They're kind of been isolated. So most of the racetams that we use are, we get from a supplement type company. There are trace quantities in different foods, but not probably in high enough dosage to really have an effect. So when we're talking about racetams, we're usually utilizing a supplement grade, purified form of it. Now, some of the things, ursolic acid and caffeine, there are a lot of things that are herbal. There are a lot of things, gotu kola, and there are many herbals that have nootropic effects. And the list is long. So there are some that are naturally occurring, and we get them from naturally, choline, for example, is one of the precursors. Well, we can give you choline, or we can just have you eat a bunch of eggs every morning. And our nutrition is a little different than most. We really look at insulin response and optimizing metabolic response to nutrients and keeping insulin levels low. So very often we have our patients either ketogenic or pretty low carb, and the goal of reducing insulin levels, because insulin is very inflammatory and it leads to things like diabetes and hypertension and cholesterol problems and everything else. And so adding those choline sources is pretty good. And we work well with others, but very often I'll have somebody come in, we'll do something, we'll work with them for 3 months or so, and they go for a follow-up with their doctor, and their doctor loses their mind because I've got them eating bacon and eggs, and putting butter in their coffee and doing all this stuff, and they freak out. And we do a lot of benchmarking, and we say, well, listen, you dropped your body fat percentage 10% in that time. You dropped your triglycerides from 300 to 80. Your HDL went up. You've lost 20 pounds. You've lost 3 inches off your waist. If that's from putting butter in your coffee and eating eggs, maybe we're doing something right. And we have a lot of physicians actually in the practice because, to their credit, some of them actually pick up the phone and say, what are you doing? And how did you do this? We cure diabetes, type 2 diabetes, difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 1, you don't make insulin, so that's different. But type 2 diabetes, on average, we get people off of insulin in 2 weeks. Why is that? Again, am I the world's most bright doctor? No, but I understand the physiology, and you have to understand that type 2 diabetes is not a disease, it's a lifestyle problem, and it's something that we went out and got for ourselves, and if we deal with the underlying lifestyle issues, it can only do one thing, which is resolve. And we have very good results for that. Yes, sir?
So, in the instance of diabetes, many medical doctors say, once a diabetic, always a diabetic. How do you help and work with doctors with the paradigm shift that, it is possible?
That's a great question, and I got asked that question by one of my patients the other day because she had come in and she said, well, I went in and I told my doctor I don't have diabetes, and he said that. Once a diabetic, always a diabetic. And I said, well, what criteria is he using? Because your fasting blood sugar is 75, your hemoglobin A1C is 5.4, and so diabetes is defined as 6.5 or higher. Prediabetes is 5.7 to 6.4. So hers is 5.4, 5.5, so completely normal. Her fasting insulin level is 6. Her triglycerides are perfect. So how is that diabetes? There's no criteria. So it's ridiculous. Now, type 1 diabetics, they don't make insulin. We'll fix that. That problem is going to get fixed because of genetics, our understanding. We're going to be able to fix that problem. We'll fix type 1 diabetes in the next 5 years, I bet you. But they're incorrect, and I will be glad to debate anybody about that, because if you have no evidence of any diabetes, how can you tell somebody that they're a diabetic? Now, that being said, if you go back and eat, Ho-Hos and Twinkies as your only meal for the next 5 months, you'll get it again. So you have the potential to have more diabetes, but you don't have it now. And again, it's a difference of perspective. And we always are talking about lifestyle. I always tell people there's no diets that work. The only thing that works long term and permanently are making these permanent lifestyle changes. And the reason that diets don't work, remember I'm a bariatric physician as well, is that when people have weight problems, they're living this lifestyle that's here. And then they go and do a diet. And it doesn't matter what the diet is, whether it's Atkins or Weight Watchers or the chocolate chip cookie diet or whatever Oprah's pushing this week. They move their lifestyle over here, and what happens? They lose some weight. Now, very often they don't lose fat, they lose muscle, but they lose weight, and then what happens? We finish our diet, and where does our lifestyle go? What caused the problem? What's going to happen? So we go the opposite way. We say, you know what, this is the way we need you to live. Put it over here. And the side effect of that is we're going to get the weight loss. We're going to reverse the chronic disease. You're going to feel better. But we've got to understand that this is where we need to live. But I'm a pragmatist. I understand that, there are birthdays and there are vacations and there is Christmas and family reunions and your mom's, favorite dish. So once we get people fixed and we get them where they need to be, as long as they're there 85, 90% of the time, they can go and visit the dark side every once in a while because they do have cookies. But we want them here most of the time, and that's how we get that prolonged, 30, 40, 50 years of optimized health that we're looking for. So do you want to just do it on the screen?
Yeah, I might have to do it from this thing down here.
All right, well, you want to put it up on the... Sorry about this. Any other questions I can answer? Yeah.
Like, if in sports they don't allow performance-enhancing drugs, how is it that performance-enhancing drugs are allowed elsewhere? Isn't that like an ethical issue? Or?
I don't think so. I think that, the reason we don't allow performance-enhancing drugs in sports is because we want to have a level playing field. Right. If you're a business owner, if you're a CEO, if you're looking for that next promotion, do you want a level playing field against your competitors? Honestly, do you?
Well, how long do you have to take this stuff? forever?
I mean, it really is about, optimizing lifestyle. That's a big piece of it. And we're really focusing on the brain stuff today, but it's about a lot more than just this. It's about, it's about fitness. It's about nutrition. It's about metabolism. All those things we want to get well. A lot of this stuff can be used symptomatically. I've got a big project. I want to improve my focus. Some people use these things chronically. Again, it's about competition. We work with a lot of professional athletes. We work with NHRA and NASCAR drivers to improve focus and concentration. This is, there's no rules against improving reaction time.
If I take something that makes me smarter, right, and then I get my board certification, that board certification was me enhanced by drugs, right? If I stop taking stuff,
You still have that basic. What we're trying to do is optimize your performance. We're not going to turn, that the guy in your high school that works at 7-Eleven and got C's and D's in college. We're not going to send him to medical school. But what we're doing is we're taking people and improving performance 10 to 20%. So we're taking high performers and taking them higher. And there are definitely, ethical questions. I don't have a problem with it. I'm 50. I want to perform better than I did when I was 40. I don't have a problem with that, and most of our patients don't have a problem with that. We're doing it safely. We're doing it in a monitored way, and again, a lot of our patients own businesses. They're competitive people. They're competing against other people. Those other people are doing everything they can to get ahead. And so I personally don't have an issue with it. Does anybody else have issues with it? I'm curious. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You referred earlier to the go pills that the military is issuing.
Yeah.
There were, in the press, those were blamed for a lot of violent incidents.
Oh, yeah, because what are they?
Murders, a couple suicides.
Yeah.
And the military, as a result, quit issuing.
Yeah.
Is there any validity to that?
Yeah, it's Adderall. That's what we were giving them. They were giving them amphetamines. And, those things in high chronic use result in psychosis, all these horrible problems, and they're very addictive. It's not as bad, but we used to have a really bad problem locally with methamphetamine. That's essentially what was in those go pills. It was Provigil and amphetamines. They're great, and they still use them actually in the Air Force. We used them for pilots that needed to do like a very long flight, 12, 15 hours, but they're not given. They used to be issued, and what would happen is they get, and they were used in World War II. They were, but those are the compounds we don't want to be using because they're dangerous over long-term use. These are considered by the government to be GRAS, generally regarded as safe. There's no studies to show that they're harmful. Yes.
So is Adderall and Ritalin and all those dangerous, and racetam's not? I mean, like the side effects that you put up there are pretty much the exact same. Increased energy, increased focus, etc.
Right.
So is Adderall just the extent to which it heightens that makes it dangerous, or what's the?
Adderall is a controlled substance because it's very addictive. Amphetamines are very addictive, and in high doses can result in psychosis and problems. So methamphetamine, you guys seen like documentaries, that methamphetamine is the same stuff. It's the same class of medicine. It's an amphetamine.
So because of its.
So we're using it in low dosage for folks that have ADD. We can get an opposite effect. So instead of them being super stimulated, it actually calms them down. I think it's way overused, but it's abused in the workplace because it's a performance. It's a nootropic. But again, if we're gonna be doing that stuff, why not do it safely, in a way that has been studied as safe? It's not going to cause you to go psychotic and murder somebody, which is what can happen with things like Adderall. Yes, sir.
Have you ever looked into why things like Adderall are not addictive to people with ADHD? Like
The dosages are low. So what happens is people won't get the same effect, and they start going higher and higher. And so we're using very low dosages for kids and things like that, and so that's why we're talking. I think the highest dose of Adderall is 30 milligrams, which is not really that much. And for a lot of kids, they might be on 5. And there are other compounds that have sort of similar effects. I'm not a believer that we should deal with behavior problems with drugs. What Tracy does is much more effective because we can rewire those kids' brains. You know, kids are kids. You know what? They are rambunctious. I have 3 of them, I know. I don't want to steal that from them and make them zombies. There are some kids that, you know, I think that in the schools, the kid's active and they get labeled and the teacher says, I know people have been told by their teacher that the kid needs to be on a medicine. I'm not going in and teaching math in your classroom. I'd prefer that you don't give out medical advice, you know, because that sets people up for chronic use. I've got a patient whose 5-year-old was diagnosed, and they want to put him on medicine. And my question to my patient was, well, you know, you put the kid on at 5, he's going to be on it at 20 and 30. I mean, is that where we want to start? Maybe there's other options that we don't need to start there. We can do some other things that don't require medications and get the same effect. It's like I apologize about this. We weren't sure. Yes.
Are racetams available over the counter?
Yeah. For the most part, they are. They are essentially labeled as supplements for the most part, and you can, if you look up nootropic, there's a bunch of places that will sell them. The problem is that people, if you don't know what you're doing, can get into trouble because you can burn out, you know, baseline stores of choline and other precursors, and you really need to know what the goal is. So there are some that we use symptomatically. So I've got a big project due tomorrow or in 2 days, and I really need to be at the top. You know, we might have a stack that we use for just that. We've got a sleep stack that we use that has lemon balm and L-theanine for people who are having issues with sleep. We use a lot of melatonin. Melatonin is another thing. We deal a lot with sleep. Sleep's an important thing. One of the things we talk about is exposure to blue light. So your phone, your laptop. You know, Apple's got that night mode now. What is that for? It chops out the blue light waves because we were raised as hunter-gatherers, right? When the sun goes down, you lose the blue wavelengths and it stimulates release of melatonin and we fall asleep. And then when the sun comes up, those blue wavelengths are back and we wake up. Well, if we look at a tablet where we're at sleep, instead of our melatonin levels doing this and we fall asleep and then come down in the morning, they do this. So when we have people who have sleep problems, which we have a lot of, my first choice is not to reach for a drug. It's sleep hygiene. What does your sleep look like? Use the bedroom to sleep, not to watch TV, not to read, do it someplace else. Let's get rid of the blue light. I have my patients buy these, you can buy them on Amazon, they're UVEX yellow goggles. Put them on at 9 o'clock. We'll get rid of that blue light exposure. Let's do everything we can to optimize sleep before we jump to medicines. And I can tell you that I don't have a single patient that I prescribe Ambien to or benzos because we can almost always get them sleeping well by looking at those underlying causes. Again, it's a little bit different philosophy. You go to your doctor. Does anybody know in the US today how much time the average patient spends with their primary care doctor a year? Any guesses? 20 minutes? An hour? You'd be lucky. 10 minutes is about average. And so is it because your primary care doctor is a horrible person? No, but your primary care doctor is working in a horrible system and they've got to see 30 patients in a day and they've got to supervise a PA or two and they've got to do all this paperwork and nonsense that has nothing to do with medicine. And so for them, it's a lot easier to give a script because they don't have an hour. I spend an hour with every one of my patients when they come to see me. So we get to talk about stuff. We get to the root cause of things. If I only had 10 minutes, then I'd be reaching for my prescription pad to try to, make a quick fix. We put Band-Aids on things instead of dealing with the underlying problems, which is how we get to, goodness gracious, almost there? Okay. So part of it's philosophy as well. Yes, sir.
So regarding sleep, have you found that there's a varying amount of sleep that different people need? Like I find that I get 5 hours is good, but I always hear that
Yeah.
I need 8 to 10 hours.
It's one of the things that drives me crazy about medicine, because what do? We look at populations. Thyroid's a great example. We deal with tons of women that have thyroid issues and they go to their doctor 10 times complaining about thyroid symptoms and they're told they're normal and we do a little bit closer look and they're abnormal. People aren't dumb. They're not going to take time out of their day to go see their doctor, park, get out of work, everything else because they don't have something going on. And I believe if people have made the time to come see me, then I've got to take what they say seriously. So what do? We do population studies, and I'm going to use thyroid as an example because for TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone, which is what we typically look at to determine whether someone's got a thyroid problem, the range of normal is about 0.35 to 4.5. Now that's a 10-fold range. There's hardly anything in medicine that has a 10-fold range. If your potassium had a 10-fold range, you'd be dead. So what has happened is that we've averaged in tens of thousands of people, and we've averaged, I think, and a lot of endocrinologists are starting to think the same thing. We think there's probably a lot more thyroid dysfunction in the population, but it's gotten averaged into the average. So your doctor's going to look and say, if you're within that range, you're good. That's where we talked about optimization. What's optimum? Well, an optimum free T3 is 3.5 to 4.5. If you're female and your free T3 is less than 3, you are going to have symptoms. You're going to be fatigued, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be losing your hair, you're going to be gaining weight, you're going to be anxious. All those classic thyroid symptoms, I guarantee it. Same thing with testosterone, with all these other things. So there's a difference between optimum, and for you, 5 hours may be optimum. And we have to be okay with that everybody's different. And that's why we talk about personalized medicine as opposed to sort of population medicine. Are we good?
Ready? Yes.
All right.
My apologies, guys, on this technology delay. We're just going to do something brief here to show you guys what we do, an initial assessment. If you came in, what you guys are looking at here, this is part of the neurophysiologic stress testing that we do, and then we'll get to some of the brain stuff here. But what we want to take a look at real quickly, let's look here at this EMG. This looks for any muscle tension. So the whole point of the neurophysiologic stress test is to get an idea of how the body's performing. Biofeedback, it looks at feedback from the body. So we're looking at heart rate variability, skin temperature, muscle tension. A lot of times under stress, those things can rise. They might not get high enough. So we want to get an idea of where people are. So we start them out with what's called a neurophysiologic stress test. Right now, what Mindy's doing is just relaxing as best as she can, and I'm just taking some numbers here. We won't go through this whole component because of the time, but she'll go through a bunch of tests like color words test, a math test. So what I'm measuring for her is how stressed she gets under these scenarios. Think about work, for example. If you guys have deadlines to meet, things coming up, the physiological components of us change. And it's a good idea to get feedback on what's going on, because with that feedback, we can take these numbers and make adjustments and set protocols for our clients to help them improve. So Mindy, tense your shoulders up for me. You guys watch these lines here. You see that change? Can you guys see that pretty good? You see how the muscle movement, the waves got a lot faster and sharper. Now relax for me. Look at that decrease. You see that difference? So the idea behind what we're doing here in terms of muscle tension and stress, if we can see what's going on in the body, especially when we put scenarios in place, if some people tense up, we can teach you skills on how to relax, how to adjust, how to breathe properly to improve your performance. So we're optimizing what you normally do, because a lot of times if we're stressed, we don't know it. You might recognize your sleep's off, your eating habits have changed, something's off, but you're not really quite sure what the variables are contributing to what's going on for you. So what we want to do is create a game plan, body and brain, to work on improving the entire person. And so we also look at skin temperature. A lot of times the skin temperature, if you kind of feel your hands, some people's hands get sweaty when they're under stress, sweaty palms. You guys heard of that? So we can teach people on how to control the physiology by giving them several exercises, taking them through various techniques on controlling their breathing, their heart rate variability, while we're also monitoring this on a computer screen. So we gather the information. That first component is a neurophysiologic stress test, where we get a bunch of numbers, and we get norms from that. Where should you be? So we're able to show the person where they are, but also where they need to be in order to reach the goals that they have for us. Okay? And I know I cut us on time, so I'm going to show the brain component of that. Let's see here.
So not only can we improve general stress, but we can also, when people feel stress, we give them some tools to calm themselves down and to deal with it. So that's part of the biofeedback training. Now again, normally we'd be looking at about 20 leads on the brain, but we're just doing 2, I think, right?
Yeah, and we would normally be looking at a nice little head map, but just because we're here today, when I tried to upload the head map, it decided, no, I don't want to do that today. So we're just going to look at brain waves for right now so you guys can still get a gist of what it is that we do. And I'm going to plug Mindy back in here. Let's see here. All right. Oh, Mindy is melting. She's been waiting so long, she is melting. Let me just put this back on you. These are called sensors. We place sensors on various parts of the scalp. So you know how I was talking about biofeedback is feedback from the body? Neurofeedback is feedback from the brain. So we're literally getting the electrical activity that her brain is naturally producing. We're not putting anything inside of the brain. We're not taking anything away. We're just getting feedback on what your brain variations is normally doing, okay? Let me put another one here. Sorry, it's a little hot in here.
It's okay.
I just want to get a clear signal, clear enough for us to show you guys what we're doing here.
Again, this is sort of the software end of the equation. How those individual neurons are firing, how they're working.
Okay. Oops. Okay, don't need that. Yes. Okay. Let me get your... They're really falling off of you, aren't they? And that's the thing, too. With these sensors, you have to ensure that they're connected properly. Because if not, your signals come up like this. And that's not what we want. She's melting. Can you slow down for us?
So again, by utilizing this, we can find out how people are working
I don't think we're going to get...
at baseline,
You're
and then we
literally
can
melting
put them
on your
through a
head.
series of tasks, and we actually do those tasks with the eyes open, and we do them again with the eyes closed, and we get a nice baseline set of data on individual function, especially task related, and then we can identify, is that optimum or not for that particular task, and then we can design the neurofeedback stuff to deal with that.
These sensors are literally melting off of Mindy right now, so our signal is not as clear as I want it to be. But what I want to show you guys, if I can get it to come up just a little bit. You see those little bars there? Those little graphs coming up at the bottom? Come on. They're falling off of you. They're trying to come back. Is it okay if I wipe these off real quick and do that? I'm going to wipe her down and then try it again.
So I'll talk about a little bit more, some other things that are going on. We are up in Concord right now, but we're building a state-of-the-art facility in Charlotte. We should be in May. One of the things we're going to have there is an anechoic chamber. And one of the other ways we can improve brain response, and it's been well studied, is actually using patterns of sound. And so an anechoic chamber is a completely soundproof and completely absorptive chamber. So if you clap your hand, there are no secondary reflections. There are about a dozen speakers in there, subwoofers. It's acoustically perfect. And so we can utilize that to use biofeedback in there and neurofeedback. We're going to use it for massage because it's just a great soundscape. We're going to use it for yoga and Reiki, but we're also going to use it for therapeutic for anxiety, depression, relaxation exercises, and it's going to be pretty neat. They poured the floor of it the other day, and I think our move-in date is May 17th. We also have a huge med spa. We've got a really amazing nurse esthetician who's a wizard with fillers and Botox and laser and all that stuff. And my wife, who's my office manager, we have an adjacent, our new facility is about 5,000 square feet, but we own the adjacent 2,000 square feet, and now apparently we're putting something crazy, salt spa and mud baths and apparently, I don't have any say in this, so, but it's going to be pretty cool. And we'll be there in May, and Tracy's going to have a really nice area that we will guarantee function for our equipment.
Yes.
While we're messing with this, I'll take any more questions because it is getting a little bit late.
And the idea behind what I'm trying to show you guys here is if we could see her actual brain waves on this computer screen, we would have an idea of where she is. That frontal lobe is our executive area.
Oh, there we go.
Is it coming up?
Almost.
They're kind of sliding. I think it just might. They're sliding down and trying to connect.
So executive function,
Yeah,
decision making.
decision making, impulse control, performance, emotion regulation. So the idea, what we would be trying to do is we would have Mindy hooked up just like this. I would do a little assessment scan on where her brain is. I'm going to do, like we said, we normally have about 19 areas that we're reviewing, front to back, side to side. We're looking for how fast things are moving. A lot of times anything moving too fast is considered overactive brain. An overactive brain, we can see the racing thoughts, anxiety, rumination, trouble shutting that mind off. Or we're looking for things that aren't moving fast enough. And a lot of times that could be the brain fog, motivation concern, fatigue, kind of like the guy we were talking about. He had a lot of that low power. So after we do that assessment, we get a map, that color-coded map that you guys saw a little example of when Dr. G was putting up the pictures there. That map shows us where people are. We get an idea not only from the body, how's the body performing, but we also get an idea of what the brain is doing. With that information, we're able to give clients feedback on this is where you need to be. What are your goals? We set that up in the beginning. Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to improve? And we have targets that they're trying to reach. I know Dr. G was talking a little bit about some of the training sessions. They're watching a movie. The movie is just feedback. If the brain is running too fast, for example, what we would have seen with Mindy since she's drinking coffee is a lot of fast activity. That gives the brain a spike. That gives the brain that boost. If it's going too fast, a lot of times too fast is okay, but sometimes it can be getting in our way. So if it's getting in the way, if it's not performance-based, the movie screen will be dark, the sounds will be off, she will get no feedback from that. We won't reward that behavior any longer. There's a threshold in which she needs to be going in order to maintain that control. When she's in that zone, you'll instantly see the sounds get louder, the screen gets brighter, she'll get instant feedback that she's in the zone. And so we're training her over and over and over again, stay in the zone, stay in the zone, stay in the zone. And once she does that over and over again, she remembers it. The brain remembers it. Just like for all of us, we probably learned how to ride a bike when we were young. We haven't done it in a while. Some people might still ride, I don't. But if I got on the bike today, my brain would remember what I needed to do in order to make that happen. So that's what happens with the neurofeedback. The brain starts to learn new tasks, it gets out of its old way, and we create new neural pathways and allows people to improve in their performance. So I apologize, we can't really see the brain waves here, but these are our measurements here. Low beta, and that beta, we're looking for certain ranges that we need to be at in the thresholds. We just can't quite see that. It comes up every now and then. But that's the idea behind what we're trying to do with improving performance with the brain and the body.
Yeah. So we're essentially rewriting the software. You know, the software that's running on that computer that's the brain. And once we do these sessions after a number of times, that becomes the new normal. And that's, you know, the patient learns how to keep the brain where it needs to be, and hopefully that's in an optimum range. Again, if it's pathology, if it's PTSD or a traumatic brain injury, we might be trying to improve performance in a particular area of the brain that's damaged, if there's depression, if there's anxiety. But if we have somebody that's functioning well, then we get to ask that question. So we work with some drag racers. What do they want to improve? Reaction time. So 1/100th of a second improvement in reaction time may be the difference between winning and losing. Absolutely. So we focus on reaction time. We work with a company that with one of the race teams, and we're working with their pit crew, because their pit crew last year cost them a bunch of races because they kept making mistakes. They weren't focused. So we're working with those guys to improve their focus. We're doing some physical stuff with them as well, but they were making a lot of mental errors, and the idea is to improve that so that the team does better. We work with NASCAR drivers to improve focus, especially if it's a long race. If we can give them some tools to stay focused for longer, it's safer and they're going to perform better.
And the idea too is if you can get feedback on how you're doing, a lot of times you do better. And a lot of times if you're making mistakes that you really can't see, things that go on the physiological side of us we can't really see. Also the mental side of us. You get into that loop, The only thing that you remember is the mistakes you made. That's the only thing that keeps reeling off in your head. Don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. But what if you could see what you were actually doing right? Keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that. So what you begin to notice when you go through the training program is you're learning how to be successful. You're learning what your breath rate needs to be and how you need to breathe in and really kind of fill up that belly. A lot of times we instruct people to breathe, but we teach them how to breathe. I can tell you, go ahead and breathe, relax. Okay, what does that mean? If you're doing it incorrectly, it means nothing. Question?
Yeah, can you think of brain changes to food allergy, like gluten or something like that?
Sensitivities.
Can you think of those things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a lot of times, too, not only with the food sensitivities, we see a lot of the sensory related things, whether it's the food, whether it's the lights, whether it's the sound. So when we're in that chamber, that's going to be huge because we can block all those things out because we have a lot of kids and adults with several sensory overload that's real. So it does impact the brain. Yes.
Is it going to also block non-ionizing radiation?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Going to also block non-ionizing radiation?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Non-ionizing radiation, like
Oh,
things like
we don't have any way of detecting that.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know. I can honestly say I have no idea. We don't have any power lines going directly over our clinic, if that helps. We've got to wrap it up. These are some of the things we can treat in terms of pathology. We talked about focus, attention, our anechoic chamber. We do personalized genomics, which we're not going to get to. And this is our new little facility here, which they just poured our floors, and so it's big, and it's going to have some really state-of-the-art technology in it. So we're excited about that. And we talked questions, and there's some contact info. We've got some information here. We've got some temporary brochures since we're moving. We just have some cheap. It's at Benfield Road, right off of 45 at Prosperity Church. So it's about, from here, I think it's about 15 minutes from this spot. That new section 45 is really nice. Yes, sir.
How many companies in the United States offer similar services?
To my knowledge,
In terms of what we're trying to do in the performance realm, I know with biofeedback, neurofeedback, people are using it all day long for the anxiety, ADD, ADHD, because it is the #1 alternative for ADD, ADHD. But in terms of peak performance, there's very few.
Yeah,
there's very few using it specifically for that purpose.
there's really, we've had a lot of people come in and look at physicians. There's very few places in the country that do what we do in terms of the focus on performance. People may do some of this, but we also have a concierge care model. So when we do, we do very big assessments, 2-day assessments where we look at everything from physical performance. We do DEXA scans, VO2 max testing, baseline fitness, hormonal testing, and then we work with people on a concierge basis, for years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Mindy.